Good morning friends, welcome to the point. In this video, we will discuss about what are barriers to trade. So as you all know that it is not possible for any country to live in isolation or to survive in isolation, as no country can produce all the goods and services that it wants. It often depends upon other countries across the globe for import of goods and services. So, during the course of import and export, many countries often resort to putting trade barriers, sometimes to protect their domestic industry or sometimes to even distort the trade or the free flow of it. So, that is what is called trade barriers. That whatever the regulations or the restrictions that a government of a country place on the free flow of trade, the motive behind it could be anything, but the restriction that is placed on the free flow of trade is known as trade barriers. So we will go through the slide. Trade barriers are government policies or regulations which place restriction on free flow of international trade. As you could gauge from the name also, that barriers, trade barriers, so barriers to what? Trade. So trade barriers can either make the trade more difficult and expensive or prevent the trade completely. So there are certain types of trade barriers which we will discuss in the upcoming slides. Some of the trade barriers makes the goods expensive, which makes it difficult for them to compete in the domestic industry, and some trade barriers are such that prevents the flow of trade completely. We will discuss about them in the upcoming slides. As of now, what you need to understand is what are trade barriers. So anything that is restricting or regulating the free flow of trade for any motive, it could be for some political motive or to protect the domestic industry from the foreign products, it is known as trade barriers. Now starting with what types of trade barriers are. So first is the tariff barrier and the other one is the non-tariff barrier. So when talking about the tariff barrier, as you could gauge from the name, tariff means some duty or some taxes by this, right? So if you levy some duty or tax on the import or export of good, then what you are doing, you are imposing a tariff barrier on the free flow of trade. Tariff barrier is a tax imposed on the import of goods, either on the basis of per piece basis or percentage of the value of product. Such a kind of tariff makes good expensive in the importing country, making it difficult for them to compete with the goods of domestic industry. I'll explain you with an example. For example, India is importing cars from Germany. Now per car, the value of car is 10 lakh rupees for one car. Okay, so there are two ways of imposing tariff on it. First is at the with the percentage value. So if I say 20% tax on the value of product, okay, so 20% of this 10 lakh is the percentage method and the other one is the per piece method. So if I say 50,000 per piece of car imported, so if there are 10 cars that are imported from Germany in every month and 50,000 per piece on it, so 50,000 into 10 would be the tariff that would be collected. So first method is on the that is the percentage method, that is the percentage of the value of the product imported, and the other one is the per piece method, as I told, 50,000 for the per piece of or per car imported in the country. So this was all about the tariff barrier. Now moving on to the non-tariff barriers. So anything which is other than the tariff barrier is non-tariff barriers. We will definitely study what are the types of non-tariff barriers. In tariff barrier, we were imposing certain kind of duty or tax on the product, but in non-tariff barrier there is no such duty or tax that is levied. There are certain other methods through which the trade is restricted. So another way used by the government to restrict trade is using non-tariff barriers, which is done by either imposing import quotas, limits on the quantity to be imported. Non-tariff barriers are used either with trade barriers or are used separately. So sometimes there is a combination of tariff and non-tariff barrier that is being levied by the government, or sometimes it is just the non-tariff barrier that is being used by the government. Now we'll take up the types of non-tariff barriers. So the first one is licenses. In this, the business house has to take license before importing items in the country. For an example, if I want to import crude oil in the country. Now what government will announce or make a policy is that anyone who is willing to do a business of importing the crude oil in the country has to obtain license from the government. So by this, what the government is doing is it is controlling the trade of importing the oil in the country. How? By issuing licenses. So there is definitely a limit on the number of licenses that the government will issue, so that so that anyone cannot just import the oil. So this is kind of regulating the trade by issuing the licenses for a particular kind of business or a product. So this is one of the non-tariff barrier, that is issuing licenses. Next is quotas. In this, the country sets a particular limit on the quantity of goods to be imported. So if the government says that we will only import 50,000 tons of sugar or 50,000 tons of oil from so and so country, and rest will be produced in the country itself. So this is what quota is all about, when you put a limitation on the quantity of a product to be imported. So this is quotas. Third is embargo. Now when the country totally restrict a trade with the other country, let's suppose India sever all the ties with respect to import and export with Pakistan. So that is embargoes, when a country impose or several countries officially ban the trade of specified goods and services with another country. For example, India and Pakistan usually resort to such practices when some kind of attack or some kind of war is going on between the two countries. The last one is sanctions. In this, a country imposes sanctions on another country so that it is not able to trade freely with other countries. The best example of this is, if you remember, 2 years back, US imposed sanctions on Iran. Okay, now with respect to some nuclear reactor issue. Now US told all of its ally country that if you keep on importing oil from Iran, then USA would be imposing restrictions with that respective country also. For example, US clearly communicated to India, who depended on Iran for import of oil, that if India doesn't gradually stops or reduces the oil import from Iran, then US would definitely sever the ties with India for providing the defense equipments that the US provides to India. So gradually what India did is that it reduced the amount of oil that it imported from Iran. So that is causing, if you see, the indirect impact of it is that it is causing loss to Iran, as it is not able to freely trade its oil that it used to do before US imposed sanctions on it. So in sanctions, what one country does is that it imposes sanction on some country, and it tells its allies that if you keep on importing or if you keep on maintaining ties with the country that is being sanctioned, then it would be difficult for them to carry out a good trade relation with each other. So the indirect loss is to the country that on which the sanction is imposed, that it is not able to trade freely in the global market. So these are the 4 types of non-tariff barriers that the government often uses. So by this, I hope it is clear to you what are the trade barriers and what are the 2 major types of it. One is the tariff barrier, in which some duty or tax is imposed on the import and export of goods. And the other one is the non-tariff barrier, where no such duties and taxes are used. It is the other method that is being employed by the government to restrict the free flow of trade, or sometimes also to protect the domestic industry from the outside imports. So friends, this is all for today's video. One thing I would like to tell you here is, please try to remember the types of non-tariff barriers through examples. So now that would make your life very easy, and you will be able to retain the things for the longer duration of time. So friends, this is all for today's video. Stay fit, stay at home. Thank you so much for your patience listening.